Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're in the kitchen again, and today we are going to make a 3-grain bread. And when I say 3-grain, I mean we are using 3 different types of flour, and we are also using 3 what my grams used to call punch-up ingredients. 3 ingredients that really make the bread stand out. So let's get started. It's actually really easy, and this is a delicious hearty bread that is good for toast, good for sandwiches, good for a lot of different things. I'm going to use my bread maker just because I can do the mixing in the bread maker. I need when I have to, but I have so many animals and such to look after, allowing the bread maker to do its job, at least until the dough is finished. It helps me a lot. You shouldn't be ashamed to use a bread maker. I find it basically the same as using a mixer, except this does the kneading for me, and my particular bread maker does a really good job. Anyway, let's get started. First thing we want is a cup of milk. Do not use water, okay? You want a cup of really nice milk. Okay, nice milk. I use 2%. 1% doesn't work really well in this particular bread. 2 tablespoons of butter. You can use margarine if you like. That's fine in this particular recipe. But I use butter. I don't see the point in using a bunch of margarine when I usually have butter in the house. But you can use margarine in this recipe. You want about a tablespoon of molasses. You just want to darken up this recipe. You want a nice rich flavor, and molasses is a great way to do that. The next thing we want is about a 1/4 cup of honey. I'm just going to guesstimate. This is a brand new honey, so I'm very lucky. I'm using orange blossom honey. You can use any honey you like. Okay, any honey you like, but you want about a 1/4 cup. I'm just squeezing right from the thing because I'm pretty good at guesstimating what a 1/4 cup is. You can absolutely measure it. Okay? Next up, we want to add our punch-up ingredients, at least 2 of them. We are going to add a wheat germ. This is at your local grocery store. If you can't find it there, some stores don't carry it. You can order it online. Okay, through the pandemic, I had to order mine online because none of my stores are carrying it anymore. So this is just wheat germ, and it's about 1/8 of a cup. Okay, about 1/8 of a cup of wheat germ. Put that directly into your milk because it'll help soften it a little bit. We also have about 1/8 of a cup of wheat bran. Remember, we really want to punch this up. Our third punch-up ingredient will go in after we add the flour. So for flour, we are using 2 cups of white flour. Okay, we don't want this bread too heavy. We want it rich and hearty, but not dense and heavy. So 2 cups white flour. Then we want 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour. Okay, this will get our bread really almost tasting nutty, which is great. Then we want to add 1/2 cup of dark rye flour. I like a dark rye flour. It has a little more depth of flavor than your lighter rye flours, so a nice dark rye flour is definitely the way to go. Then we want our third punch-up ingredient, which is about a 1/4 cup of sunflower seeds. Use the roasted ones. Don't use raw sunflower seeds. Raw sunflower seeds in this bread will taste kind of weird, so make sure they are pre-roasted. Whether they're salted or not is up to you. But definitely use sunflower seeds that are already roasted. Our final ingredient, a heaping teaspoon of yeast. Nice big teaspoon of yeast. Make sure it's heaping. You want to get enough in there. So those are our ingredients. We're going to pop this in the bread maker. The bread maker will, of course, mix, knead, and do the first rise for me. So when we come back, it will already have completed its first rise. If you want to do this by hand, you obviously have to put your dough in an oiled bowl and let it rise after you've kneaded it yourself. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter. You can either mix it by hand, you can use a mixer to help you, or you can use a bread maker. It really doesn't matter. So we'll come back after the first rise and we'll see how this is doing. All right, so our 3-grain dough is ready. Now we have to shape it into a loaf. Now when you're shaping it, you may notice that some of your sunflower seeds, they might fall out onto your mat or onto your counter. Just roll them back up. Okay, because there are quite a lot of sunflower seeds in here. There's a full 1/4 cup. So you may, from time to time, have these just fall onto your mat or your cooking or your rolling surface, like that one did. It's not a big deal. You just pinch everything together, roll those up. A couple fell over there. You just roll them up. It's not really a big deal. So what I'm going to do is kind of take your hands where you see any separation in the dough, and you just kind of grab it, like almost like you're making a caterpillar out of your dough, you know, caterpillar along the edge. No big deal. It just helps keep it from separating. And then roll your dough out. You're going to want about a 10-inch loaf. You can do this in a loaf pan if you want, but I find I get better results just putting it directly on my cookie sheet. So what we're going to want to do, I'm just folding in my edges because they're a little bit narrow, but you want an equal thickness loaf that's about 12 inches long. And then this is a dough that's a little bit drier because of all the bran and the wheat germ and that kind of thing. So you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of humidity trapped in here. So I'm putting it in my microwave, which traps the natural humidity of the dough. You can also just put a damp tea towel over top of it, and then on top of that, put a piece of plastic wrap or even just a plastic grocery bag if you still have those. Whatever you have, you want to trap that humidity because this is a naturally drier dough than some of the others you may have worked with. Because between the wheat bran and the wheat germ, you do end up with a little bit of dryness in the dough. You can also, if your dough's really dry, wet your hands down and then run your wet hands over the dough to try to introduce a little more moisture without putting moisture inside the dough. And then you put your damp tea towel and your plastic wrap over top, and that'll help trap humidity really well. So mine's looking fine here, and mine doesn't feel too dry, but I'm still rising it in my microwave because my microwave is a closed system, so nothing gets in or out, so it'll trap the humidity really well. So also when you're doing this, kind of just check and see if you feel any air bubbles. I don't because I rolled them out pretty well, but if you feel any air bubbles, you need to squish those air bubbles shut. All right, you need to give them a nice press to get rid of those air bubbles. Once you get rid of all those air bubbles and your dough is looking the way you want it to look, you just bring your baking pan or cookie sheet, pop it on there, cover your dough up quite well, and if you see any cracks, just give them a press because you don't want any of the cracks still existing. So we're just going to pinch along here because there's a crack. So you just want to do that, give everything a fluff. And now we're just going to stick it aside. You're going to want this to rise for probably an hour and a half because it is a denser dough with the whole wheat flour and the rye flour. So you do want to give it a little extra time to rise. So we're going to set this aside for an hour and a half. So then we'll come back, see how it's doing, and probably bake it up. All right, our dough has risen up. It's quite fluffy now, or as fluffy as a 3-grain bread is ever going to get. So we're going to bake this at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. You want it kind of dark. Before we stick it in the oven, we're going to gash it with our bread lane. 1, 2, 3. I do 3 gashes out of habit, but this just helps as it's rising. It puffs up instead of getting all weird, though it will get a little bit weird because you notice I have a few flaws in my dough. It's just bread though. It doesn't matter if you have a few flaws. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I do have a flaw here, but no big deal. We still want to do the gashes at the top just to allow it to poof a little bit when it's rising as it bakes. So it is ready to go in the oven, and our oven is preheated. Remember, 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. We'll come back when it's done. Well, our 3-grain bread is finished. It's looking fantastic. It's fresh out of the oven, so it's very, very, very hot. Burns my fingers every time I touch it, but it is still lovely bread. Look at how nice that is. Now, 3-grain bread is best if you wait at least 10 to 15 minutes before you slice it. It is excellent for toast. It's excellent for peanut butter and jam, sandwiches, really anything you can think of. It's a nice hearty bread with a lot of seeds, a lot of fiber. It's just a generally very nice bread. So I hope you try making this at home. It is not difficult and everyone will like it, I promise. So thanks for joining us today in the kitchen. If you'd like to see more of our baking, please just do a quick subscribe and we will make sure to keep baking for you. See you tomorrow.